If you are standing in downtown Toronto right now or looking out over the sprawling skyline of the Greater Toronto Area, take a moment to really look at those glass towers glistening in the sun. They look majestic, don't they? They stand as towering symbols of the economic boom that defined the last decade of Canadian history. But today, I want you to look closer. Look past the reflection of the sunlight and into the dark, empty windows of those thousands of units. What you are looking at is not a sign of prosperity. You are staring directly into a graveyard. We are witnessing the formation of the largest investor graveyard in modern North American history. Right now, as we speak, there are over 50,000 condominium units, assets that were once valued in the tens of billions of dollars, that are effectively dead on arrival. They are finished or nearing completion, but they have no buyers, they have no tenants, and for the investors holding the contracts, there is absolutely no way out. For the past 5 years, the Canadian public has been sedated by a comforting lie, a dream that whispered that real estate only ever goes up, that housing is a risk-free savings account that never fails. But that dream has shattered. We are now watching a financial wipeout of catastrophic proportions, a crisis that is freezing capital, seizing assets, and annihilating the net worth of the middle class. This isn't just a market correction. This is a systemic liquidity freeze. And lurking in the shadows of this collapse is a reality that many dismissed as a conspiracy theory, but which is now playing out with terrifying precision. The "you will own nothing" agenda. Today, we are going to peel back the layers of this disaster, expose the mechanism of the collapse, and reveal who is waiting at the finish line to scoop up the wreckage of the Canadian dream. To truly understand how we arrived at this precipice, we have to rewind the clock to the height of the pandemic, to the years 2020, 2021, and early 2022. This was the era of cheap money, a time when the Bank of Canada slashed interest rates to near zero and flooded the system with liquidity. We all remember Tiff Macklem appearing on our screens promising that rates would stay low for a long time. That promise acted like high-octane fuel on a fire. Suddenly, money was free. Mortgages were available at 1.5%, and in that environment, a dangerous psychological shift occurred. Teachers, taxi drivers, software engineers, and small business owners, people with no background in professional real estate investment, suddenly believed they could become property tycoons. The fear of missing out, or FOMO, became a national contagion. The asset of choice for these amateur speculators was the pre-construction condo. It was the perfect trap because it lowered the barrier to entry. You didn't need to come up with $800,000 up front. You just needed to sign a piece of paper and put down a deposit. 5% now, 5% next year, spreading out a 20% down payment over several years. The logic was seductive and, in hindsight, incredibly naive. Investors convinced themselves that they were buying a paper contract for $700,000 today that would magically be worth $1 million by the time the building was finished in 2025 or 2026. The plan was never to close on the property. The plan was never to become a landlord or to deal with tenants. The plan was always to assign the contract, to flip the paper to a greater fool just before completion, pocketing a few $100,000 in profit without ever taking out a mortgage. It felt like free money. It felt like a cheat code for wealth creation. But the music has stopped. The year is now 2026 and the buildings are finished. The developers are calling for final closing. But the world has changed. The greater fool never showed up. Interest rates are no longer at emergency lows. They have tripled or quadrupled, making the carrying costs of these units mathematically impossible for most investors. And now, those 50,000 speculators are waking up to a nightmare scenario known as the Appraisal Cliff. This is the technical mechanism that is decapitating the market, and it is crucial that you understand how it works, because it is the reason why the banks are saying no. Let's look at a typical scenario playing out thousands of times across the city. Let's imagine an investor named Mike. In the euphoria of 2021, Mike signed a contract for a one-bedroom shoebox in the sky for $800,000. He scraped together every penny he had, perhaps borrowing from his line of credit or his parents, to pay the $160,000 deposit. He was confident that when closing day came, the bank would hand him a mortgage for the remaining $640,000. But today, Mike walks into the bank and the loan officer hands him a rejection letter. Why? Because the bank doesn't care what Mike promised to pay in 2021. The bank only cares what the condo is worth today. And after the market correction, that $800,000 unit is now appraised at only $600,000. This creates a deadly gap. The bank will only lend 80% of the current value, which is $480,000. Mike still owes the developer $640,000. That leaves a shortfall of $160,000. To close this deal and get the keys, Mike needs to come up with $160,000 in cash, immediately on top of the deposit he has already paid. But Mike doesn't have the cash. His liquidity is gone. He is trapped. He cannot qualify for a larger mortgage because the stress tests are too high. He cannot sell the unit because he owes more than it is worth. He is technically insolvent. This is not just happening to Mike. It is happening to tens of thousands of people simultaneously. It is a mass extinction event for the amateur investor class. The immediate result of this realization is panic. If you check the assignment sales listings on Facebook Marketplace, Kijiji, or Realtor.ca, right now, you can smell the desperation. The market is flooded with investors trying to unload their contracts before closing day. The headlines on these listings are screams for help. Urgent sale, walking away, below purchase price, will lose deposit. People are begging someone, anyone, to take these contracts off their hands. They are willing to walk away from $100,000 or $150,000 in deposits just to avoid being sued by the developer or blacklisted by the banks. But the tragedy is that liquidity has completely evaporated. Nobody is buying. Why would a smart buyer purchase a distressed assignment contract when they can wait a few months and buy a foreclosure for even less? The market has frozen. And when the investors walk away, when they throw the keys back at the developer and choose to default, the contagion spreads up the food chain. This is where the crisis transforms from a personal tragedy into a systemic collapse. You see, developers don't build skyscrapers with their own money. They build them with massive construction loans from major banks and private lenders. These loans are contingent on the developer selling and closing the units. The bank expects to be repaid when Mike closes on his condo. But when Mike defaults and 10,000 other Mikes default, the developer loses their revenue stream. They are left holding hundreds of empty units that they cannot sell and cannot afford to carry. The interest payments on their construction loans are astronomical. This is why we are seeing a record spike in developer receiverships. It is a bloodbath in the construction sector. Major projects are being seized by lenders. Cranes are standing idle. Construction sites are going silent. The lenders, the banks, and private equity firms are stepping in to foreclose on entire towers. They are seizing the assets because the developers are insolvent. But here is the catch. The banks do not want to be property managers. They do not want to deal with thousands of individual distressed condos. They classify these as toxic assets. They want to clean up their balance sheets as quickly as possible. They want to unload these assets in bulk, for pennies on the dollar, to get them off their books. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the moment where the conspiracy becomes reality. This is the moment where the title of this video, Sold to Wall Street, comes to life. When there is blood in the streets, the sharks start feeding. While Canadian families are being wiped out, global institutional capital is circling overhead, waiting for the bottom. We are talking about massive US private equity firms, real estate investment trusts, and asset managers like BlackRock and Blackstone, entities that are sitting on hundreds of billions of dollars in dry powder, cash reserves ready to be deployed. These institutions play a different game. They don't buy one condo at a time. They buy wholesale. They are approaching the insolvent developers and the panicked banks with offers to buy entire towers, 300, 400, 500 units at a time. And because they are buying in bulk with cash, they are demanding deep discounts. They might pick up these assets for 50 or 60 cents on the dollar, prices that no individual Canadian buyer would ever be offered. But here is the darkest part of the transformation. What do you think happens to those condos once Wall Street owns them? Do you think they will put them back on the market for you to buy at a discount? Absolutely not. That is not their business model. Their model is the usership economy. They will convert these buildings into what is known as purpose-built rentals. These units will be permanently removed from the ownership market. They will act as a vacuum cleaner, sucking up the supply of purchasable homes and turning them into rental stock. This is a fundamental restructuring of Canadian society. We are witnessing the death of the middle-class ownership model and the birth of a rentership society. The future that is being engineered is one where a few massive, faceless corporations own the cities, and everyone else pays them for the privilege of shelter. You will live in the pod. You will pay rent to a New York-based hedge fund. Your rent prices will be determined by an algorithm designed to maximize yield for shareholders, not to provide affordable housing for citizens. The equity that your parents built by owning a home, that ladder has been pulled up. The wealth generation vehicle that built the Canadian middle class is being dismantled and transferred to the balance sheets of global capital. This is financial feudalism in the 21st century. The "you will own nothing" slogan was never just a catchy phrase from the World Economic Forum. It was a forecast of an economic model where assets are concentrated in the hands of the few and services are rented to the many. The 50,000 empty condos in Toronto are not just empty rooms. They are the inventory for this new era. They are being consolidated. The foreclosure process is the mechanism of transfer. The pain of the individual investor is the profit margin of the institutional buyer. So, what does this mean for you? If you are one of the investors trapped in this cycle, the reality is harsh. The hope that the market will magically rebound in 6 months is a delusion peddled by real estate agents who are desperate for their next commission. The structural fundamentals have broken. If you are facing the appraisal cliff, you need to sit down with a professional insolvency trustee or a lawyer and look at the numbers without emotion. Sometimes the least bad option is to walk away, to accept the loss of the deposit, to save your future income from being garnished for decades. Do not throw good money after bad. Do not bankrupt your future to save a mistake from your past. For those of you sitting on the sidelines watching this collapse with a mix of horror and schadenfreude, do not be complacent. This wipeout will have ripple effects that touch every corner of the economy. When billions of dollars in wealth evaporate, underconsumption collapses. When developers go bust, tradespeople lose their jobs. When banks take heavy losses on commercial real estate loans, they tighten credit for everyone. The credit freeze is coming for small businesses and personal loans, not just mortgages. However, in every crisis, there is opportunity for those who are prepared. The mantra for the next 2 years is simple: cash is king. In a deflationary asset bust, liquidity is the most valuable asset you can hold. While the speculators are drowning, those with cash and patience will eventually find opportunities, but not yet. Do not try to catch a falling knife. The bottom is not in. We have not yet seen the full impact of the mortgage renewal wall of 2026. The inventory is still building. The desperation is still rising. The landscape of Canada is changing forever. The dream of homeownership is being sold off to the highest bidder, and the highest bidder is Wall Street. We are watching the foreclosure of a nation. The signs are everywhere. Frozen accounts, seized projects, wiped out savings. The transfer of wealth is underway. You need to understand the rules of this new game, because if you don't, you are just another asset waiting to be acquired. Stay vigilant, protect your capital, and do not let yourself become a statistic in the investor graveyard.